now that I can do this. I'd like to call this meeting of the Ellsworth Planning Board to order, February 8th, 2018. Let us introduce ourselves, please.
John DeLeo.
Darrell Wilson.
John Fink.
Jim Barkhouse.
Roger Lussard.
Ed Miera, I'm the city's attorney.
If you're not careful, you'll be made to
Not a
vote.
voting member.
First item of business, well, actually, the second item of business here is the adoption of the minutes from January 10th. Is someone prepared to make a motion regarding the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adopt the minutes as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of adopting the minutes? They are adopted. Now, the next item of business is a preliminary plan for a major use site development plan and major subdivision titled Atlantic Storage for Atlantic Landscape Construction. The proposal is to build 11 self-storage buildings and 4 residential duplexes, total of 8 units at 124 Bangor Road, which is formerly the New Land Nursery. This is located on 2 parcels totaling 9.5 acres, tax map 50, lot 41, and 68, lot 79 in the urban zone. Someone representing the applicant, please.
Steve Salisbury, representing the applicant. With me tonight is Greg Johnson, the project engineer.
Go ahead, please.
Nice to see you back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I'll go over the existing conditions part, then Greg is gonna go through the development plan for you. This is a 9.5 acre parcel. We're basically gonna start with a clean slate. The only attribute that's gonna remain on this property is the existing office building next to the road. We have over 950 feet of road frontage on the Bangor Road with 4 entrances. 2 of those entrances we are going to discontinue. We mapped out, there's a significant amount of existing impervious area, which I highlighted in the tan for the engineer to use in the stormwater study. There's a small amount of wetlands next to the road, which we will impact a piece of. There's a wetlands down here by Gilpatrick Brook, and another piece up by Rick Honeywell's property. Neither one of those will be impacted. There is a floodplain boundary next to Gilpatrick Brook, but as you'll see on the development plan, we're well outside the floodplain. So that lays out your existing conditions, and I'll let Greg go over the development plan.
Good evening, I'm Greg Johnston, GF Johnson Associates, I'm the engineer for the applicant. Probably a brief overview of where you were at sketch and now, and some of the merits I think we've done to the plan. As Steve has developed topography on site, we were able to rotate the buildings. The drainage used to be from the road this direction, so we found the benefit of, for preliminary stages, to rotate the buildings. Had 2 things: allowed the runoff to run between them as opposed to being interrupted periodically with the buildings. That in itself was able to minimize what we would say is underground storm sewer. It also had the benefit of putting a shorter side to the building towards the road. So it had some benefits also for as far as massing and the structure themselves. The other thing that through the development of the plan, there's quite a bit of direct runoff from the gravel areas that's developed, shooting directly off the site to the east. As part of the development plan, I know there's a lot on the plan. There's a proposed curb line that runs along that side that allows us to capture that runoff, which would be unrestricted grit and route it through the rain gardens and filter basins on site. So there's just some smaller changes that were made, I think, from earlier on regarding the storage units. For the residential units, basically We've moved them up into a bit of a higher ground to increase make a larger buffer from the Dunham Brook. That allowed us much more, a lot greater units, gravity fed for leach fields. It also allowed the buildings to take on a slimmer profile from the road as opposed to being a long strip. We've stacked them, again, minimizing the massing. I think lastly on here, which is probably not as apparent, but creating a berm off the front here that allows some root ball depth. Right now with the gravel and what's out there, it's compacted gravel after years of use in commercial site. If we can get a berm, we can get some plantings in there, and that's gonna help with the screening. So I think that's a brief, besides the good work we've done with the water and sewer department through the TRT. That's a brief overview, and we'll hand the meeting back to the board. Thank you.
Questions, board?
I had a couple of questions. The first one was about snow storage. Is there a place on the plan where you have set aside for snow storage?
We have,
Oh,
yeah, between the two ends of the what would see the emergency turnaround is.
okay,
Not necessarily in the filter basins, yep.
all right. Okay, yeah, I missed that, thank you. Yep.
But kind of as a follow-up to that, I had a question on that too. It seems like a awful small area for as much area as you're gonna be plowing. Cause I noticed on your competitor up the road, a little, I don't know if it was on purpose or whatever, but one of his fences, I think, kinda got eliminated, I think, cause of snow storage and the lack thereof.
Well, there's no fence in that area. And he's got a couple of huge loaders that'll
Yeah,
pile it up as high as we need to.
And I guess to also zero on that, I don't think we're mean specifically just that area. We've graded this side off along that parking, anticipating that could be used as well. And generally the area between the two parking areas.
I noted on, on all the plans and in your presentation that you're gonna go from 4 entrances to 2, which I applaud the city and I applaud the applicant, cause I'm sure you realize that would have been one of my bones of contentions. But I did notice and probably just noticed on page 15 on the section 602, 607-2, you still reference the middle entrance as remaining. But I noticed on the rest, pretty much the rest of the material.
On page 15, John?
Yes.
Okay. We'll make that correction.
There was a note about boundary lines per agreement on the plan.
Yes.
What was the purpose of that comment?
I have to go back to B1. Many years ago, Soper and the former owner of Atlantic Landscape Property came to an agreement as to where that boundary line is that goes down and turns and makes a triangle shape.
Where the storage buildings extend into? you
Yes,
mean?
that's right. There was a line agreement executed there.
So that's part of the official boundary of the property now?
Yes, that line agreement was recorded.
So on the existing conditions plan, that dotted line that cuts off that triangle, that's what got moved?
That dotted line,
Right there?
Yep.
Is
Here.
that,
that's just a mathematical tie from that corner to that corner. It also separates, this was actually a separate parcel at one time, but that line is representing a mathematical connection,
oh, just a way to survey
that's all.
that corner out there, okay, I get it. I thought that line had something to do with the agreement. But it-
No, that line has nothing to do with the agreement, the agreed to line was here,
Okay, cool.
up the road.
Thanks for clarifying that. That makes sense to me now. The other note that I had was a dedicated wood buffer. Was that gonna, a woodland buffer? Is that shown on the plan, that that's gonna remain as part of the stormwater plan?
We intend to dedicate basically from the limit of disturbance through until, like, you can't use the wetlands as a buffer, but it's about 150, 200 feet as a dedicated buffer.
Is that gonna be noted on the plan
Yes.
eventually?
Yep, on the final plan.
Okay, cool, thank you.
You did ask, if I may, that it be noted on the ground, like we've done in other places in the past, some way, we've done that with Steve in the past, some way to mark it, so there's a way to remember that it's not to be mowed, cut, or
Is it-
disturbed over time.
Is that all wooded right now, or is that still clear?
That is all
It's
wooded.
All right,
Yep, behind the existing buildings is all forest.
okay. Yeah, so that would be something we'd like to see. The other question I had was about the lightings, cut sheets for the fixtures.
Mhm.
One of them specifically says full cutoff. The other two, one appears to have like a shroud around it, and then the other one, it wasn't clear, what the intent was with those, and if, do they qualify as dark sky friendly, full cutoff?
So the one that you, let's see,
It wasn't the ones for the storage buildings, it was the other,
Page
the other two.
95 and 97.
so they're both recessed, recessed fixtures, and with, you'll see on the exhibit, we've written full cutoff. We didn't include the spec for the cutoff, but the cutoff shield goes with it.
Uh-huh.
And all the bulbs are recessed up in, not exposed on the bottom. And so, they are full cutoff.
Okay.
And so, whatever else I can give you to show that, but that's the intent.
Yeah, if there's shrouds that you're gonna add, please include those in the plans. And then the other question I had about the lighting in general, is, I didn't see lighting for the office and the parking right outside the office. What was the intent there?
The intent there being that it was an existing residential use, and we read in the ordinance that the existing residential use were exempt from the lighting requirements, and thought that them and the 60-watt bulbs that are out to light the deck probably weren't part of this. We're happy to go figure out what those are. I did see, though, that exempt from this was single-family dwellings and that, and so we put it underneath that.
Okay,
But
And
that's not intended to be used as a dwelling any longer, is it?
It's gonna be an office space.
So I would suggest that the lighting standards apply. It's a change of use.
That's fair enough. It's pretty low level. It's easy enough for us to get that on there for you, sure.
yeah, and I think those same fixtures that were on the storage units, or, you know, I would just be, so the other question about the lighting is, what are the proposed, like, hours of operation? Are the lights on the storage units gonna be on all the time? Is the office open late? Like, what is the lighting for the site look like over a 24-hour period?
So the office is intended from like 9 to 5, maybe to 7 at times.
Mhm.
Storage units would be on timers, such that after dark they would come on. And that's the business plan to date.
Okay, so, yeah, I think the office and the office parking for the evening hours, I think it would be a good thing for the customers to have lighting there to negotiate that office. Seems like that use would require that. So you said sensors, they would come on at nighttime. The whole like, that eastern boundary that we were just talking about, that's all treed right now? It's all woods?
It's cleared on our side of the line.
So the lights on the outside edge, the storage units that are on the outside edge,
Yes.
Yep. So it's all forested there, not even within 10 feet of the line does it get to be 0.1 foot candles.
Oh, okay, so it drops,
It's
the
done.
intensity drops right there.
Yep, those lights are mounted like 4 feet above the ground. They're meant for people who are moving and dexterous, but they're zeroed in at the ground. And so they don't spread very far.
Okay.
Yep.
So those aren't like overhead, over the door kind of lights? They're just
No, they're strictly,
like walkway lights?
they are, yep. And they're not mounted high, they're mounted just so that people can see inside. And when you look at the illuminations, it's directly at your feet where you would back your car up to get in there. And
Okay.
Yep.
I missed that, thank you.
Yep, and you can see how quickly, I guess to me, reading all the numbers with the illumination scales gets busying, so we lump them into 5 to 10 scales, and that 0.1 scale is the yellow, and after that, there's nothing within that 10 to 15 foot space to the property line.
Okay.
Steve, you had noted you were impacting some wetlands.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Tell us a little bit more.
You wanna take that?
Sure. There's an existing culvert that crosses Route 1, and it's a drainage way. That's washed out and eroded, and we're gonna extend that pipe and reclaim that area. That's gonna be impacted. So we've extended that pipe through. And so in there, I think it's like, it's under 1,000 square feet, I believe, of what they call forested wetland. And a permit wouldn't be required. I think it's already been disturbed technically because of how the culvert's been cleaned out. So it's definitely under the 4,300 square foot threshold for requiring a permit. And it's gonna be through the act of extending that culvert through.
Okay.
Yep.
The building and the pavement isn't part of that, right? The storage structures don't extend into that,
The storage structures don't extend into that.
but you are gonna extend the piping.
We are, we're gonna
Through
extend the
there.
pipe, and we're gonna obviously cover the pipe over, and that act is creating the impact to the wetlands.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, we have a few items, but all two, they can wait and they can be addressed at the second meeting.
Okay.
Most of them are technicalities, and one of them you addressed with regarding the forested buffers.
I don't have anything else. Did you guys have concerns?
I guess, I'll bring up the note, the anonymous note about kindly check on wetland encroachment before approving number 4. I mean, have you seen that note?
I saw the note. I don't know what on earth it means.
That came back on one of the abutter notices?
Correct.
Somebody sent that in, handwritten? Okay.
So from the city standpoint, there's no issue with that?
Well, I think there was during the site visit, there was a gentleman from across that access, his house, it's in a butter from the other side, it's accessed via, Christian Ridge Road. And definitely that abutter had mentioned some concern to the wetland and the impact. So I think that's somewhat consistent to the comment, but that's,
Yeah, I think he was concerned that the the buildings, the apartments were gonna be too close to that wetland, and now they've been moved forward.
Correct.
So that kinda takes that issue, if
And what
that
we-
was the issue.
So what we've asked is that the wooded buffer be delineated on the plan, and also there be some type of markers, you know, just at
In the
regular
field.
distance, just to remind people kindly that it's a buffer that serves a purpose, that it's not to be disturbed, or people don't know. So it's easy in 2 years to go to a little weed whacker and do some maintenance,
Makes sense.
so. Some decoration.
There's also a mention about the salmon, Moreland Brooks had salmon.
Yeah, in the wetland report, yes.
Yeah.
She has to contact, all
So you have to get
all
more
the
permission from the
agencies, and they'll
state.
give us a letter.
Exactly.
Every coastal tributary is tagged as salmon, potential salmon habitat.
So they have to look into it.
They have to
Yeah.
look into it.
Any other questions? This is a public hearing. Anyone may comment on this matter. I ask that before you speak, you be recognized by the chair and then go up to the lectern and identify yourself for the record. Does anyone wish to speak? Seeing none, I will close the you do?
I have a question about the order of business. I just don't know when I can insert that question. It's not related to this.
Okay. Okay, board, what would the board like to do? Finding of completeness?
Mr. Chairman, with regard to the preliminary plan for major use site development plan and major subdivision plan titled Atlantic Storage, item number 4 of the agenda for Atlantic Landscape Construction, I motion that this is an allowed use in the zone and the application is complete in terms of submission materials for Article 6 and as applicable Articles 8, 9, 10, parking standards, and also the subdivision ordinance 28.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion at this point? If not, all in favor, please indicate. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, there may be other people in the room that were here for Woodlawn, so it may be appropriate to let them know that Woodlawn decided last week not to be heard tonight.
Okay, so did everyone hear that? Woodlawn has withdrawn the application at this point, and we will not be discussing it.
That was in papers. You live there, right? Across the street.
The next item of business is an amendment to the October 4th, 2017 approved major subdivision and minor site use plan titled 208 High Street redevelopment, previously referred to as commercial development, for Ellsworth Retail Management LLC. The approved plan consists of 2 commercial buildings totaling 16,881 square feet, with a total of 4 units, 1 in one building and 3 in the other. Proposed amendments is for 2 commercial buildings totaling 15,061 square feet with 5 total units, 1 in one building and 4 in the other. Project is located on a 1.8 acre parcel at 208 High Street, tax map 131, lot 47 in the urban zone. Is someone representing the applicant, please?
Yep. Good evening, Mr. Chair. I'm Doug Reynolds with Goral Palmer, back again. Again, we're presenting this project. The previous applicant sold the property to this 208 High Street, Ellsworth Retail Management LLC. As part of the changes that they're making, they're proposing to break up that second building into 4 units versus the 3 that were originally approved by the board. And as part of doing that, they cut off the back corner of one of the buildings, reduced the size of the buildings, added a little bit more parking, and then we've adjusted the parking lot and some of the utilities based on comments received from staff subsequent to our submission. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and go ahead and move forward on this one again.
Board, questions?
I have a question about the parking. On the site data, you have that there's 66 required parking places and you're providing 101.
Yep.
And I note in chapter 56 under, let's see, it's section 1105.4 has to do with excessive parking. And the ordinance considers, if I understand this right, that anything over, up to 25% is excessive. It's over 25%, there's a process to follow. Maybe the planner can help me out on this. That any request to exceed the minimum parking space requirements from 25.1% to 38% shall be considered overflow parking and shall comply with the process established in section B. Has the excessive parking you would apply? I guess I don't understand why you need so many parking places, I guess it boils down to.
Are you asking me,
Well,
or are you, I can explain
guess it
the
kinda goes to
ordinance,
both
but
of
I
you.
cannot explain the reason why he needs so many parking spaces, which answer?
Why don't you go first, Michelle?
Want me to go first?
Yeah.
So the idea was that when you were with the city, I'm sure you remember, that we were seeing developments that were building parking lots that really were for maybe once a year, maybe once every 5 years, they would need that amount of parking. Excessive amount of parking space area creates stormwater runoff that needs to be handled and managed. And the idea was we definitely are looking for density and not for people to build parking for the highest hour that happens, say, once a year. So we changed our parking, I'm sure you remember, because you worked on this with me. We changed the requirements, and during the same thing, we changed this together. But seriously, the idea being that if they wanted to largely exceed parking needs, then they had to do pervious parking spaces. Kind of like creating an incentive for people to be a bit more serious about what they need and what's to be used. It's definitely waivable. In this case, it's a small lot and they are also managing their stormwater on site before releasing it. But, so that's the reason behind it, is to try not to have large boxes that will create twice as much parking as they need, basically. That's why it was written in there.
Okay, now,
And our answer is that at this point, the tenants for the building are, 2 of the tenants are pretty set, but the remaining 3 on the 4-unit building are not set, and providing the maximum amount of parking provides flexibility to what those end up being ultimately. And again, we would have to come back to staff if it's a more intense use, and as long as we don't go over the traffic trip generation requirements, we wouldn't have to come back to the board. But again, it could be, there's, is it a eye doctor, is it a nail salon, things like that. We're just, trying to provide the project with the most flexibility, and not have to come back to the board. And as Michelle said, we are treating the stormwater per the town's requirements, with a pretty significant biocell system in front of the site.
Not the large franchises that we're talking about were not doing that, mind you, they were still doing that, but.
So you're saying that depending on the use of these retail, they could potentially require more parking spaces? How did you calculate the 90?
It's the required was calculated based on the retail use. Retail use is again, based on the ordinance, it could have been, that the retail use is again,
So you're saying that those
3.6 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Again, there may be more intense uses that require a higher number, but again, it just allows that flexibility to the developer to bring in somebody else, sign on somebody else.
And for the pervious, John, the number that is in excess between 25% and 38 is the only spaces that would be required to be pervious.
So what is that number?
You mean, what does it mean in this case?
No, well, yeah, what is that specific number? If we've proposed 66 and we've got 101, that's like.
Well, that's 53% over.
So 53 minus 38.
I didn't calculate the 25 or 38, but 101 is 53% over 66.
Okay.
And some of those are taken up with snow storage, I noticed. In the back corner. So,
Yeah, we're showing 6 spaces with snow storage in the back.
Exceeding the minimum space requirement by up to 25%. So they could exceed it by 25%. They could exceed 66 by
Correct.
25%.
Which would be 83, and then
So the difference between 83 and 101.
101,
Like 17 something, 16,
18.
18.
spots. And just normally with this use, Michelle, you're saying that those 18 would be the pervious ones?
Correct. Now, the one thing we have to remember is, there's a difference between a parking lot of 100 spaces and a parking lot of 500 spaces to start with, and when you do percentage-wise. Those are, if you understand where I'm going. So, having 18 spaces based on this, is not having 200 extra spaces, depending on the use you're looking at.
Yes, but every development should be treated equally, and if you have those percentages, whether it's for 20 places or 2,000.
Usually, we don't have a developer that wants to give us extra spaces. Doesn't happen that often.
I thought one of the goals too of the whole parking thing is to put parking behind the buildings instead of out front on the road.
It's to
So,
put a part, is to make an effort to put, the way it's written is not, it's more advisory than regulatory. It's make an effort to, and I did look at that, and.
but, so does that inform us as to where these pervious spaces should be potentially located then?
No, I would like to be able to tell you yes, but the answer is no. I think in this case, I think the applicant did make some, well, I think Not sure if the applicant made some effort or the way the lot was and what he wanted to do led to this, but nevertheless, it definitely is not a store of parking spaces in the front, so it achieves the goal, which is wonderful.
So for further references, not necessarily this case, but we would prefer to have like dirt for excessive parking.
Not dirt, compacted dirt is also referred to as a pervious area. We would be looking at
Grass.
more of a,
Grass,
no, it's like a structural, I'm not sure what the word is, but it's a structural kind of thing that's put into the ground and
would,
then.
would cost them more money, right? It would cost the developer more
I
money.
can't answer that.
Okay.
And it seems kind of out of place in the front to do that, to create pervious spaces in front. I mean, this is all the existing conditions here.
It's all pavement. We reduced the impervious surface by upwards of, I think it was around 18,000 square feet by adding the islands and such that we have.
I have to say, I had missed that John did call me and ask me about,
I guess
that.
my preference would be a little bit more greenscaping instead of the extra parking.
And
But greenscaping that could be changed into parking if this use exploded, I guess. But
the applicant, I think, did do a fair job of providing landscaping, of integrating their stormwater into landscape for it. And for me, that's what the ordinance tried to achieve, so those were pluses. And I missed what John picked up, so
And
that's
it's-
why.
And it's not that a parking lot of this sort is out of the ordinary on High Street.
yes, it's really
Did you say it was out?
Not out of the ordinary. I'm good. I'm just curious on the explanation.
So, Michelle, if the board were to approve this, would you consider that the board should find an exception in this case?
Yeah. Yeah, and that would
So
be
we would need
listed
a waiver.
with the signature block, a waiver.
Well, it says here, it says, requirement about this shall only be allowed with approval by the administrator. So it
We are
would,
the administrator.
right, so our approval would just be noted, I guess, as part of the acceptance of the plan.
Well, what we do is if there's any waiver or condition, we have those listed above the signature block so that it's clear what happened and what they were granted. So you could approve with the condition that that is added. The waiver from section 1105 4.c.
My personal preference is to find out if the applicant would be willing to put landscaping into those spaces that could be converted to parking if the use changed later. But that's just me.
It's very hard to monitor long-term for us.
Might we hear from the applicant?
I actually would have to ask the applicant, if they would consider that, but, you know, and if it's a difference between an approval tonight and a not approval tonight, then yeah, they would, again, we would at least put the gravels down and loam and seed on top of it. But again, it's,
Is that area now paved?
yes.
In which case, if they were undesignated, they would still be impervious.
Right. I mean, this is just my opinion. You guys.
Are you thinking that you would want them to tear up the pavement and then?
Given that.
We're tearing up the pavement anyway, on the.
Okay, so
we're
you're
tearing
gonna
up.
put down new pavement,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So they could change some spaces into landscape.
And the question is, does the board think that's appropriate in this case? That's my opinion, but I'm one person, and there's clearly a mechanism here where we can just say, accept the extra spaces.
I know it's been a while since they came in front of us, but I know they spent a lot of time with how they were gonna, treat storm water. So I think they did an excellent job about it.
Okay.
I mean, I think they've done everything we've asked them to about stormwater. And I don't necessarily say that we should have to do it, you know, make them fall with this excess of parking.
Okay.
If, you know, if your big concern is pervious and impervious, that's one of the big things.
Yeah, it's the warming of the water on the pavement,
Yeah.
and then that water ensuring that the higher temperature with heavy metal, the waterways. So he's treating both the quality and quantity.
Yeah, I know they've been, yeah, right,
It
quality.
really,
quality.
I mean, to be honest with the process, and again, I respect, Member DeLeo for saying we need to treat everybody the same.
Question,
But 18 extra spaces is not 200 extra spaces.
If you made the spaces a little wider, is there an ordinance that says they can only be so wide and they would lose some, but if the use has changed in the future, you could repaint your lines? I'm just-
It's still the same
I mean,
impervious, yeah.
You get rid of spaces by making it a little easier to get in and out of them.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah,
All it
that's
costs is
just-
paint, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
right.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Again,
they make it fair for everybody, I
Take
guess.
precedent for the rest of the world. But, okay.
I mean, right now in some place, my daughter's down at school with a car, and she gets hit every day almost. Somebody pulling out too quick, because teenagers don't look where they're turning, and they're pulling out of a parking space and wham. They just, I've got 5 or 6 more dents already in that car since she's had.
I would suggest it's not only teenagers who pull out
Well,
without.
this is,
looking.
No.
this is, well,
I can't,
college students, I should say. So, I mean, that would cure some of it.
Again,
I mean,
the spaces are 9 by 18.5, which is the standard
Yeah.
of the city.
Suppose
Just an idea.
you didn't stripe those extra spaces. Then they're not spaces.
It's additional
Then
snow
that's-
storage
or
when I need
that's
it.
you wanna park sideways.
Yeah, well, okay. Is there any other significant items maybe we could review?
Oh, now you wanna
Further?
get to-
I would like to know a little bit more about the water service note replaced with a 2-inch service. Is that,
We bumped that up to a 2.5-inch surface.
Right.
Based on the water district's question. Again, 2.5-inch service is gonna be more than enough to serve, all the uses on the site, plus the site to the site to the rear.
okay.
Would it be adequate for uses that at the moment you don't contemplate, that would draw more water?
It would be, I mean, it's a 2.5-inch service for these size buildings, it's fairly significant.
Okay. There was another question. About a sewer easement, and it's not clear to me in this message here, because it says, there's a sewer easement between my property located at 300 High Street and the property at 308 High Street. This is not 308 High Street. Is,
I'm at 208 High Street.
yeah, and so I'm wondering where this memo or letter came from and how it's relevant. It's from Rick Traub, Bold Coast Properties. Easement survey. You
What's
guys,
the date on that?
I haven't seen it.
November 30th, 2017.
I think that's from Beckwith, that's, you're on the wrong, you may have confused some project.
For Beckwith Woods? maybe?
Oh, did I scramble my paperwork? My bad, sorry.
Yeah.
We're happy to help.
There's just so much of
However-
it sometimes.
Our Beckwith, application should make note of this. advance
Don't
warning.
jump the gun. Okay, sorry, that's my mistake.
Any further comments from the board? This is a public hearing with all the stipulations before it. Does anyone wish to speak on this matter? Hearing none, public hearing is closed. Further questions or comments from the board?
I guess just to frame the idea here is this is a revision, and we're being asked to, it's not about completeness, it's about like reviewing the changes that happen.
Right,
And there's a too detailed list of here's what the changes are, the applicant responded to them.
and they're essentially minimizing the impact compared to the previous.
The only thing of significance is that the subdivision count is different with the 4 versus the
Yeah.
3. Is there any outstanding issues that the city feel like they need to have addressed?
No, all the changes were very, non-substantial, and the only reason it really kicked it back here were because the additional unit.
Okay.
But John did catch something on the parking where that should also be addressed.
Okay. And the lighting changed slightly because of the buildings?
Yeah, we
Rearrange.
gave you a new plan just because the building mounted lights moved back because the building got smaller.
Okay. Is there any other concerns that the board has that I should include in my motion? Okay, so I'll start then. Mr. Chairman, with regard to this amendment to an October 4, 2017 approved major subdivision plan and major use site development plan titled 208 High Street redevelopment, previously referred to as commercial development, agenda item number 5 on tonight's agenda. I make the motion that we find that this meets the standards and criteria governing site development, including street design, stormwater, parking standards, with the additional approval that we allow the minimum parking space requirement to be exceeded beyond the 25%, and that parking may be required based on future use, and it might be necessary to accommodate that typical use. And that we find that it meets the subdivision ordinance as well, with the additional count, subdivision 28. The waiver for the parking should be shown on the plan, and we approve the project.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? If none, all in favor, please? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before we go to the next item, I would like to make this item 5A or something. For my own clarification, on both the project we just talked about and the upcoming project, what's the difference between amendment and modification?
Do I have to answer this tonight?
Well,
Oh, please say no, because I'm not sure I can completely. But that's where we have Ed here tonight with us.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure
Seeing you're
that-
getting paid
that,
for it, you can explain it.
The
Well,
city's
that-
legal counsel
Like I
is,
said, why don't
ready
you,
to answer that.
why don't you earn
Do
your
those,
keep?
do those terms arise out of the ordinance? Are they defined terms in the ordinance, or are they terms that the city planner is applying to the application?
The city planner reserves the fifth, thinks the fifth of the moment.
I think it matters not what you call them, it's whether you approve or disapprove them, and you state your reasons for doing so.
I think there's different wording
That is
in,
not entirely helpful answer.
I believe, there are different wording in the subdivision, and then from, site development, and that we would gain from aligning those words in the future. Is that a good answer?
Oh, sure, if one arises out of the site plan review provisions and one out of the subdivision ordinance provisions, that certainly explains why terms might get misused sometimes.
In that case,
So we could say they're interchangeable.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay. Right now, at this moment, they're interchangeable.
next item of business is modification to a September 5th, 2012 approved and recorded major subdivision plan and reapproval of a non-established lapsed major site use development plan titled Beckwith Pines for Downey's Main Property Management. The approved plan consists of 2 4-unit apartment buildings and the proposed modifications for 4 2-unit apartment buildings on the 2.3 acre parcel off Route 3, High Street, accessed by Beckwith Court, tax map 116, lot 47-3 in the commercial zone. Is someone representing the applicant, please? Is the applicant ready? Would you identify yourself for the record, please?
Yes, Mac Harriman, land surveyor, and we have Alina Watt, professional engineer with us, representing Mike White. No, at the last meeting, we had a complete review, and we needed 3 items added to this package. And one of them was screening around a dumpster. A note on the sewer issue the city council voted on, which is added to it. And also the water line situation with the city taking over a portion of it. And those notes are covered on here. Notes 22, 23, 24. Any other questions or anything else you'd like to ask?
No one has any questions?
I noticed that we were given a letter from the city about water and what they were willing to take on as far as the water line.
Yes, that would be the first couple 100 feet of the water line. Mac has shown a valve in front of the Beckwith Woods association, and then there's an existing valve that goes to the hydrant. So the city's responsibility would stop there. So from High Street to those 2 points would be the
Okay,
city's responsibility.
including a T
Yes,
and the 2 valves.
yep, up to the valve.
Okay. And currently, Beckwith Woods owns all of that?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question on, it stems from, a notice from the TRT meeting dated January 2nd, and concerning the special exception from Chapter 5 sewer ordinance, which went to the council. And on the last page under 4B, it talks about the maintenance agreement. Specifically, an executed maintenance agreement between the owners of the adjacent developments, Beckwith Pines and/or Down East Main Property Management, Beckwith Woods, must be in place prior to Beckwith Pines or Down East Main Property Management is allowed to connect to the Beckwith Woods Community Association private sanitary line. Is that maintenance agreement in effect? Has that been executed?
I'm gonna let the manager answer that, because he's working with Mike Harris on that.
My question on it is, if it's not in effect, does that keep us from approving the project?
I don't believe so.
Could you just state your
Oh,
name?
sure, David Cole, City Manager, Ellsworth. I'm not aware that an actual written agreement is in place, but I believe the developer, Mike White, has met with Mike Harris, the superintendent of the wastewater treatment plant, and I believe that is in progress. But it wasn't my understanding that it would necessarily hold you up tonight. It would just be a condition that the city council put in place with its exception that it granted.
But would that, I mean, I understand Mike being the wastewater superintendent, but, I mean, where does it, I mean, it has to be negotiated, if I read this correctly, between Beckwith Pines and Beckwith Woods, rather than, yes, please.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the developer. I know where he's going.
Michael White, Down East Main Property Management. You know, obviously, there's an issue that if the agreement doesn't get approved, you know, that hypothetically we're dead in the water. In talking with Mike at the TRT meeting, one option, of course, that is allowed by the city and that I can do is I can take over the water line, the sewer line rather, in full. In other words, I assume the entire water line out to the sewer line rather, out to the street. So for any reason we have an agreement that may not be agreed upon, I'm allowed to take over the line because we already have the easement rights to the line. Obviously, we'd like to go 50-50 on it, and we'd like to have some help with it, but for some reason, if we can't come to an agreement, we can still move forward.
I would, can I ask council if that's what he agrees with, that, I mean, I'm basically fairly still new to this. I mean, would this be like the applicant coming in and having no sewer line going to the project at all? Because this seems, without that agreement, he doesn't have a sewer line. And he hasn't proved to the planning board that he has a sewer line.
I think this is probably going to address a lot of issues that I think are involved with the review of this project. We are better off as a board and as a city to review applications on the basis of a very minimal showing of right, title, and interest. This packet included a purchase and sale agreement. Sometimes somebody will come in with a deed. We don't search the title to see if that deed is worth the paper it's written on. We had occasion, I know that Mr. Fink was on the board at that time, when was opposition, and the issue circulated around an old covenant in a deed and whether or not you could have more than, you could have rental property, whether you had to actually have single-family owner-occupied residences on the land. And we took the position, and the Superior Court and the Supreme Court agreed with us that it was not our call, one, and secondly, it was for the courts to decide what the deeds meant, and in that instance, the court concluded that the deeds did provide for construction as proposed by the applicant. So that's somewhat of a long-winded way of saying, I don't think that we should concern ourselves with whether someone has the right to fully execute their plans or not. Now, the risk we run in taking that position is that we might waste our time reviewing, perhaps approving a project, only to find that the developer in this case isn't able to perform because he does not have all of the sticks in his bundle of rights that he needs. In this case, connecting to a sewer line, or it could be a water line, or it could be access generally. We don't know. So I would take the position, and urge the board to take the position that if the applicant comes to you with what on its face appears to be sufficient right, title, and interest in a parcel of land that would allow him to do this development, we shouldn't be asking, because we're not really qualified to ask those questions. You know, we can construe what these ordinance provisions might mean and might require of somebody, but when you take a deed and try to understand it, when you take a condominium declaration of covenants and try to really understand what all of that means, I mean, this is an invitation to sue your neighbors, what those covenants are. That's what that amounts to. And I don't think that we want to be brokering those sorts of deals. I think Mr. White is pointing out quite candidly that he may not be able to pull this off. And I don't, and just so that we understand, if you were to approve the project, that doesn't give him any greater rights in his land than he is otherwise going to get by virtue of this purchase and sale agreement and the title presently held by whatever it is, W. Gray.
Thank you.
Reactions, further questions of either council or the applicant? While the board is deciding whether it has further questions, this is a public hearing. Anyone may comment on this matter. I ask that before you speak, you be recognized by the chair, then go up to the lectern and state your name for the record. Does anyone wish to speak? Yes, sir.
Christopher Stanley, President of the Beckwith Woods Community Association. I believe you all received a letter from the association stating that we would like this project to not move forward at this time until the gentleman on the end here so eloquently put, for reasons that he stated. We feel that the developer doesn't have all of his ducks in a row at this point, and our interests right now are not being valued. We have all the concerns that was mentioned before as far as his right to access, his right for use. We are extremely concerned about, we believe this is a commercial endeavor, and there is a, from my understanding, there's a gray area about using a residential right-of-way for commercial use. He's building these units solely for the purpose of income. They're not to be sold off, they're rented, and we have concerns about that. These units that he's designed to put in there don't complement the current structures that are up there. His units are at least twice as small as ours. We have units that are, our smallest unit is twice as large as his units, and we have units that are almost 4 times his size. in square footage. So I don't think the two are gonna complement each other. In size, architecture for sure is not gonna be the same. And we would just like the board to know that these are serious concerns that we have. We feel like we have met several times with the city. Michelle has been wonderful, answered tons of questions for us. There was a new proposal for us as far as the water line. We have nothing to go by as far as the water company hasn't presented us with anything as far as what they want to do. So we have no documentation about what their plans of taking over the line, not taking over the line. Speaking with the developer, personally, he told me that he showed me on his map that they're intending to take this part, but not this section of it, for reasons that did not add up to me at all. That's why they're taking over one part and not the rest of it. So that's our concerns. And we've been here before. This is, 5 years ago. I was standing right here, and I think we're more informed this time as to our rights, and we're prepared to take it further this time. Last time we were fairly ill-informed, and I think if somebody's going to come in and build next to us and use the right-of-way or the easements or however it's worded that's allotted to them, they need to do it correctly and go by what was intended when those were drawn. Those were drawn almost 30 years ago. It was intended for an entirely different project. This project incorporates, I think, a little over 2 acres. The rights of way were given at the time. I believe the property at that time was over 20 acres and incorporated most of the top of the hill up there. We are more than willing to work with the developer. But as an association having 10 different personalities and such, we need to do it on the up and up. And we're not going to be able to sign off on any agreements until we've gone through the steps outlined in our covenants, which are the same, the declaration, which is the same document he gets his rights from. And that's going to literally kick the can down the road quite a ways. Any questions for me?
Were there any specific ordinances that you could cite that you felt like weren't being met? That it would be helpful to focus our efforts?
Yeah, well, for us, I'm confused as to how the planning board can look at a plan that incorporates the water line being connected here and the sewer line being connected here and such, and approve a plan that has the connections in question. And I think that was addressed earlier.
Okay.
That's where we stand. We don't know how this could be approved when none of those things have been finalized.
Okay. So the water and the sewer.
Water, the sewer, and the actual access itself for the purpose that it's being used for.
Okay.
If the right-of-way runs with the land and not, does the original right-of-way mention anything about the particular use that the land would have?
No, but the right-of-way doesn't, where it is now, it only states as remaining lands, which at the time was over 20 acres, and that has been subdivided, I don't know how many times since then.
But still, this constitutes part of that remaining land.
Possibly. I mean, our legal advice that we got was there was a lot of murkiness here, and there's a lot of unclear facts. And
Well, as noted earlier, if we were to approve this project and the developer does not in fact have all his rights lined up, then he's not going anywhere despite our approval. So in that case, does it really matter to the association whether we, that we give approval at this point? He still has to
Right.
get all the other factors in
We
place.
we wanted to work with the developer and make sure this does work out, and this is where we're getting stuck, and we're basically getting, I'd hate to see somebody buy the property and think they have something, and then then there's something else.
That's the developer's risk,
Yes, I understand that. But
but
I didn't,
in other words, what.
for
we-
us, we didn't know if these things that we found out would be pertinent to your decision as to,
Well, unless it's a violation of the requirements of our ordinance, then we have no valid reason to say no. So on appeal, we would be overturned. Again, regardless of other factors here.
yeah.
Okay. Have you any further informational questions for us?
I'm good.
I have one question.
Sure.
Who, you have water and sewer, but it's city, right?
We own the lines privately.
Okay, so you own that part, so if something
Yes.
goes wrong, city doesn't deal with it. You have to deal
It's all us.
as individuals,
Yeah.
okay.
Now, you had mentioned that you believe this is a commercial endeavor.
Yes.
What does the, Dwight, do you have anything?
We've
what-
never really looked at residential as a commercial endeavor before.
Okay, I was just wondering what the city was thinking of.
Has a very low traffic count. You know, we look at number of trips per hour. Residential is very low.
If I may, I read part of the sewer ordinance, and in there it says non-residential.
Well, wouldn't it be residential?
The sewer assessment, sewer development fee would be it for residential,
Okay.
$500 per unit.
There's different definitions and different ordinances.
That's why I'm wondering.
Under the land use ordinance, residential is not, in relationship to how it's managed or it's owned. It's what is the use on the land.
Right.
May it be an apartment that it's rented, that's residential. A mobile home is residential.
Right.
A $5 million house is residential. A $10,000 house it's all residential.
Okay, I was just wondering, you know, why he was looking at it as commercial and not residential, or why it's residential and not commercial.
I understand where he's coming from because there's different definitions and different ordinances about, an apartment. How is it seen? Because it is a commercial, someone could say it is a commercial endeavor, but that's not, in the land use ordinance is not how we see it.
It's residential use.
In fact, under the definition of commercial use, it goes into a explanation, then it says exclusive of rental of residential buildings and or dwelling units. So those are not considered commercial uses.
I did a good job there.
There was, I think, there was a thing in there that said something about non-residential would apply to multi-unit dwellings.
At this point. If it ever said that, it no longer says that.
Okay, well, I just pulled it up from the website, from the city website this week.
Under what
I think it's
ordinance?
under the sewer.
See, that's different, because if they're looking at assessing sewer fees and things like this, and I think they have different definitions.
But as far as the
So
land
does-
use,
It's in a commercial zone as well.
yeah, but as far as, yeah.
And it's for the, it's for the sole purpose of his income.
Well, let me then read the definition of commercial use. The use of lands, buildings, or structures other than a home occupation, defined below. The intent and result of which activity is the production of income from the buying and selling of goods and or services, exclusive of rental of residential buildings and or dwelling units. So, by definition, rental of dwelling units is not a commercial use. It's a residential use. it's an allowed use in the commercial zone,
Yes.
so. We can't hang our hats on that one. Any further questions or back and forth here? In that case, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just asked Mr. Bear another question. Any issues that this gentleman brought up, whether it be, I mean, we talked about sewer, but whether it be the water line or right of way, raise a red flag from a planning board standpoint?
I don't think that it should. I mean, I'm less familiar than the rest of you with the layout of this project and reviewed the plan, but if Mr. White has an easement, has an access way to get to the road, maybe he doesn't need to tie into someone else's water line and sewer line either. It may alter the cost of his development tremendously. But those are exactly the sorts of quagmires that I think we can find ourselves in. Chairman Fink is on the right course, that and somebody can point to something in this ordinance and say, doesn't meet this standard. I don't think that it does us any good. I'm not necessarily saying that it does Mr. White any good, that we might grant him an approval if he can't pull it off because of some infirmity in his title. And that infirmity could arise even after we conclude this meeting if he gets a different deed than he thinks he's gonna get from his seller. So I haven't heard anything. The short answer to your question, I haven't heard anything that makes me change my mind.
Thank you.
Mr. Cole?
David Cole, City Manager again. Just wanted to clear one thing up. Member DeLeo was asking about the sewer line and the maintenance agreement. In the discussions we have had with the developer, including the wastewater superintendent, he is fine if the developer is willing to step up and take 100% responsibility for the maintenance. So it is within the developer's control to take that over. I understand why he would want to share this risk, because the condo association currently has 100% responsibility for the maintenance of that line there. But lest me put him in a bad negotiating position, he does have control now to provide that maintenance assurance the city needs to meet that condition. On the water, I would defer to the water department superintendent, but the city did examine the takeover of the line, and it was the prudent course of action to take it up to where it splits off to the two private service lines that would exist, and for several reasons, in terms of maintenance, accessibility, and for other reasons, it didn't make sense to go beyond that split. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask Mr. Cole a question?
Yeah.
The water line, if you understand, the water line from the public road in that exists presently is privately owned.
Correct.
And it's owned by Mr. Stanley's group.
Correct.
So in order for it to be transferred to anyone, they're gonna have to come to an agreement with Mr. White. Is that what we're?
I would assume so. I'm just giving you the logic behind why the city was only going up to the split versus beyond there.
Right.
Michael White, DMPM, or Downey Spain Property Management. In the deed, in the right-of-way, actually, I am responsible for the maintenance of the water line. And again, unfortunately, so as of right now, I'm responsible for the repair of the right-of-way, the road, and the underground utilities, and it is written in there. So I'm very pleased to know that the city is willing to take it over until the split when we own our own personal lines, and they're taking it in. They've stepped it up to take over that line, which was originally designed to feed this property on both the sewer and water stubs.
Thank you.
Now, before you leave, Mike, now you haven't purchased the property yet?
No, I'm under contract.
Okay. And have you seen a draft of the deed? Is that
Yes,
how
I
you know
have.
it's in there?
Yes, I
Okay.
have.
Okay.
The only other question I had for you, sir,
Okay, go ahead.
there was a letter, and I talked about it earlier. You were just talking about marking the sewer easement so that they could avoid it or know where it's coming across the gentleman's property.
Is that Richard
something
Traub?
I'm sorry, what?
Is that Richard Traub you're talking about?
Yes.
It does not go across his property.
Okay,
The
there's
sewer line does not go across his property.
there's a depiction in the map that shows a sewer line coming from the direction of
Yes,
Route
that is
3.
the abutter's property to him, not him.
Okay.
So it's on the first property, not
Yes.
Richard's? Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else who wishes to comment on this? Okay.
Christopher Stanley again, with Woods Community Association. I was wondering if we could have the water department explain why they decided to take over the water line and have it tee off as it's currently stated. We had discussed in earlier meetings about doing it an entirely different way. And if he could clarify that with us, that'd be great, because we don't know what the process was as far as the decision on that.
Mr. Winslow, can you answer that?
I can. Currently, the line in front of the existing buildings is about 8 feet from the buildings. There are trees and decorative lighting in that area, and I actually have photos. There's a lot of stuff in the way, and I feel it's too much of a liability for the city to accept responsibility of that. Whereas the section coming in, there's some trees there, which those we can work around, but the close proximity of the house or the buildings, the electrical and the trees. So one of those photos, there's a red circle around a service box, which is a shut-off line. And then the other one is the blow-off, and that water main is about a foot away from that service box shut-off. So that shows how close everything is.
Yes, to further my question on that was, for your guys' information, is that 5 years ago when this was first presented, the water district at that point drafted an easement to take over that water line, and it included the entire length of the front of the building. And I just don't know what has changed from then until now. And also the section of the water line that's in reference coming from High Street in passes under, I believe it's 10 pine trees. Each one is approximately 45 feet tall. I'm not sure how the city intends on maintaining that line under those trees. And why they decided that that part was okay to take over, but the other part that's easily accessible is not. And I'm sure this is probably not a planning board issue, but this is a change in the discussions that we had as far as doing this project that we weren't made aware about until just very recently.
It isn't a planning board
Yeah.
issue, specifically. And I would just comment that a discussion about what took place 5 years ago was never, and the agreement was never executed. Means, it's still open to negotiation, and the city is willing to do what it says it is now. And either it's agreed to or it's not.
Yep.
again, if this were approved this evening, and all the rights that the developer needs don't come about, then the project is dead.
Right. I felt that you guys might want to know where we stand with this and how it was, and where, you know, what's happened, because it's definitely going to impact us. And I believe that one of your main objective is to analyze the impact of a project.
It is providing that, providing the project meets the standards of the ordinance and the requirements of the ordinance.
Right.
Then we have little reason not to approve it. And if we did approve it, something that didn't meet the we turned it down, and we don't have any good reason for having, under the ordinance for doing so, then it's highly likely we'd be overturned on appeal. So, we also take seriously what the powers that we have, which are given to us by the ordinance.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
I mean, I will say, on my years on the planning board, I have voted in favor of projects that I personally didn't care for. But the ordinance said that the applicant was entitled to do that. The applicant met those standards.
Correct.
And for me to arbitrarily say, well, I just don't like it, is not a sufficient reason under law to.
Sure. And I bring up these points not to use them as a point of whether or not to approve, deny, or whatever this project. I bring it up as information that maybe will trigger questions that you might have about a particular thing that you might not have been aware of it.
And the board relies on people coming to us to give us such information. And I thank you for doing so.
Thank you.
Now, before closing the public hearing, does anyone else wish to comment? Okay, in that case, I shall close the public hearing. And now if the board has had time to think about what other things it may wish to talk about, it's time to do that. You're not gonna make me work for this, are you?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the applicant has met all the requirements that we have put before him, has been responsive to our plans, does have some things that they need to work out along the lines of agreements, that are to some degree outside our purview. So I think in the process has alternatives for the applicants and for the abutters and anybody else that wants to get involved. There are appeals processes, there are other things that the code enforcement officer sets in place where the applicant has to, meet those requirements as well. In my estimation, the ordinances that we have in front of us and what the applicant has done, I don't have anything else that I can really ask them to achieve. So with regard to the modification to this September 5th, 2012 approved and recorded major subdivision plan and reapproval of a non-established lapsed major use site development plan titled Beckwith Pines, which is item number 6 on our agenda tonight, I make the motion that the planning board finds that our findings are that it meets the section 607 standards and criteria governing site development plan review, including Article 8 performance standards, Article 9 street design and construction stormwater management and construction standards, parking standards. There are no waivers or modifications. The applicant has also met the subdivision 28 requirements, and the planning board approves this project.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion? Okay, so all in favor, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, are there any bylaws to be signed or something?
No, there isn't.
In that case, the final item on the agenda is
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adjourn our
You
meeting.
have to,
I'll second
you
that.
have Mylars
All those in
to sign?
favor?
Okay, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I am stand corrected, we have Mylars to take up the sign.
We're adjourned. You can't do them, yeah.
See you next month. No.
I ask that you reopen the meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Let us,
I would like to delay the motion that I previously proposed until after.
because we haven't
So
voted.
do we all get a little bag,
Hey,
or
guys,
we're
we
splitting the
can't
bag?
Okay.
No, we all got little.
May I, may
Oh,
I?
okay,
may I-
jeez.
Let me ask for a second, May I move that
can't
we
get it. You
adjourn
didn't
as
get
soon
it.
as we have signed the Mylars? No?
Okay, who's seconding that? I think John seconded.
Yes,
No,
he
no,
did.
Someone second the motion?
Second.
Okay, yeah, all in favor of the adjourn after we
After
do
the
the
Mylars?
Mylars?
I'm in favor.
Okay.